Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Based on our records, we have registrations from over 50 countries across African and non-African countries. Now, this points towards the increased interest in understanding Africa. My name is Chinwe Egwim, the resident economist at Africa Investment Roundtable and the senior economist at FBN Quest, an arm of FBN Holdings. On behalf of the co-founders of AIR, Ms. Oter and Ms. Sonny, I would like to welcome all attendees and special guests to our second Africa Investment Roundtable webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. For this second edition, our speakers will be discussing the theme Sustainability en route to COP26. This is topical. Sustainable development is the key to stable growth for any economy. Development should take place without damaging the environment, and development in the present should not compromise the needs of future generations. Now, each of our four distinguished guest speakers will give remarks for 10 minutes. This will be followed by a question and answer segment moderated by our co-founders. As with the last edition, it will be an interactive session, so please complete our polling questions when they pop up during the conversation. I am super excited. I've got my pen and my notepad ready, and I suggest you do the same if you haven't done so already. Now, before we begin, I will hand over to one of our co-founders, Ms. Oter.
Thank you, Chinwe. I could not agree with you more. I believe sustainability is the biggest issue for society today. On behalf of my co-founder, Mrs. Tony Sani, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the second edition of the Africa Investment Roundtable. We were impressed with the number of distinguished guests and participants that joined us for our maiden edition, which reviewed Africa's outlook post-COVID-19. There were 3,200 participants from 64 countries. This incredible interest and engagement reaffirms our conviction that people who care for Africa are yearning for thought leadership on how to harness the great opportunities that Africa has to offer. They also want to learn from seasoned experts about how to manage and mitigate any inherent risks. We decided, Tony and I, that our second edition must focus on sustainability because we believe that Africa can build forward better if it leverages opportunities that sustainability offers and manages the inherent risks our planet faces. Indeed, a focus on sustainability can unleash Africa's potential, protect our planet, ensure no one is left behind, and enable a prosperous future for all Africans. Take climate change, for example. It is estimated that a low carbon global economy is a $26 trillion opportunity that could create 65 million jobs by 2030. In addition, for Africa, almost half of Africa's GDP is vulnerable to extreme climate change patterns. So sustainability is both an opportunity and also a risk that we must manage. Post-COVID-19, many nations are taking urgent action to accelerate their sustainability agenda. Let me share a few examples. The US President Biden, started the process of the US rejoining the Paris Agreement on his first day at work on the 20th of January, 2021. The European Union's COVID-19 post-recovery plan focuses on greening the European economy. The African Development Bank, the African Union, and their partners have been leading on the Great Green Wall and the Desert to Power initiatives that could save the Sahara and the Sahel from further degradation while creating 10 million jobs at the same time. Nigeria has announced a renewable energy target of 30% by 2030. Morocco, Egypt have world-class solar farms that are the pride of the world. South Africa is leading on carbon taxes. I can go on and on various examples. The private sector is also doing quite a bit. Initiatives such as the BCOP, the economics of mutuality, which we'll hear about today from the MD of Economics of Mutuality Solutions, the US Business Roundtable, the IFC impact principles are shifting the private sector from focusing solely on shareholder returns to multi-stakeholder approaches that are anchored on a focus on purpose. Leaders like Larry Fink, the founder of BlackRock, a firm that manages about $8 trillion in assets, have become strong advocates. Young climate activists from Africa, from outside of Africa, are speaking up about the planet that we, the older ones, will bequeath to them, and they're urging urgent action. Also important for Africa is that Africans have to be on the driver's seat in respect of Africa's sustainability agenda so that it is just, it tackles hunger, poverty, and inclusion all at the same time. It should also, in my view, leverage Africa's enormous wealth in people and natural resources. We're glad to have selected 4 distinguished speakers who will help us today understand this big agenda for society. Chinwe has already taken us through the program for the event, so let me introduce our first speaker, Mr. Jingdong Hua. Mr. Jingdong Hua is the treasurer and vice president of the World Bank. Since you have already seen his impressive bio, let me focus on the highlights of his background that relate to the theme of this event. But please permit me to first disclose that he's not only my successor as World Bank treasurer and a professional colleague, but he's also my friend and brother of 26 years from when we both worked at the African Development Bank. He's held senior positions around the world at the United Nations, the Asian Development Bank. He was treasurer of the International Financing Corporation. He is passionate about the underprivileged, as well as the role of capital markets in inclusive growth. That's why I call my brother Jingdong the evangelist for domestic capital markets. And he is an evangelist that walks the talk because he's led many transactions around the world that have opened domestic capital markets to international investors and mobilized savings in those countries, many in the African continent. Indeed, as treasurer of the International Financing Corporation, he led the issuance of the first Niger bond, a bond issued by an entity that is not domiciled in Nigeria in the Eurobond markets, in the domestic markets. And this was, of course, when I was Director General, Securities and Exchange Commission, Nigeria. Jingdong has equally led the introduction of many innovative transactions to mobilize resources globally for sustainability. We have therefore asked him to set the scene by sharing lessons from the World Bank's work on sustainability, and especially share with us how, through his career, various institutions have leveraged innovation, finance, capital markets, and of course, how development banks can also be leveraged to accelerate Africa's sustainability agenda. Let me now hand over to you, Jingdong, to set the scene for this event. Thank you, Jingdong.
Thank you so much, my good friend, my sister Aruma Otei. Thank you for your kind invitation, and also co-founder Ms. Sani. I'm truly delighted to have this opportunity to share our perspective on sustainability. And I think there is no better time as we start to see the beginning of the end of the pandemic. I think we need to bring back the focus on sustainability. You know, the reality is pandemic has paused so many human activities, mobility, our daily life and everything. It never ever posed the impact of climate change. And therefore, it is high time that we bring back the issue so that, as Aruma said, that when we are building forward, we focus on making our new strategy sustainable, inclusive, resilient. So in my 10 minutes, I'll share some of my perspective, but let me start with a word that is dear to my heart, that is multilateralism. I started my international career 27 years ago in Abidjan, in Africa Investment Bank, and I have been a true believer in multilateralism. And I think this pandemic really has demonstrated the importance of multilateralism in the global development agenda, because when the pandemic hit, many national governments have to prioritize serving its own citizens, which is very understandable. And as we know, in Europe and in the United States, trillions and trillions of dollars in Europe have been deployed to help with their own domestic economy and their social challenges. But what about the rest of the world? Many countries that don't have the financial resources. This is where the multilateral development banks, the United Nations system mobilized. And I'm very proud that at the World Bank last March, very quickly we came up with a global package of $160 billion, including $12 billion dedicated to vaccine, so that even the poorest people could access vaccine. And I think that 12 billion, we intend to be able to serve about 1 billion people to obtain vaccine. So I think there is no a situation like now to say that multilateralism really serves a critical role in international development. The second thing I wanted to say is that when it comes to Africa, a region I love, I travel very often, I lived there for 3.5 years. The continent has really been on a renaissance for the past 20 years, and economic growth has been one of the highest in the world. Unfortunately, the pandemic has paused economic activities like everywhere else. I think for next year, the World Bank does project a very moderate growth of about 3%. But I think on a per capita basis, it's still a zero or slightly negative growth. Also, understandably, the debt situation in Africa next year will increase about 8% to about 70% of GDP, given government's need to tap into every fiscal space, to help with that social, human, economic fallout from COVID-19. And therefore, it is important that we draw attention not only to the immediate task of saving lives and ensure livelihood of citizens, but we need to focus also on medium long-term challenge of how do we make sure that we restore institutional capacity we restructure the economy so that it becomes more resilient. And of course, long term, how do we make sure that the build forward or build back is sustainable, inclusive, and resilient? Now here, I wanted to focus on the climate side. So I'm happy to see that of the 160 billion package that we have offered our client countries, we have already now come up with over 300 projects that is helping over 100 countries, and of which 190 projects are for the continental Africa. And I'm glad to see that almost half of those projects have a climate focus, which is critically important. You know, the fact is, as I said, that pandemic paused many activities, but didn't pause the impact of climate change. So in a sample of 30 African countries, 2/3 are warming up faster than the global average. And also, you know, study shows that 1 degree Celsius increase in temperature reduces the economic growth by 0.67% in much of Africa. And we also estimate that for 1 degree Celsius increase, that would be an estimated decline in global crop yield of 3 to 10%. And if no dramatic actions are undertaken to boost growth, Africa's share of the world's poor population may increase dramatically from 55% in 2015 to over 90% in 2030. So we face really an urgent agenda. How do we make sure that Africa restores faster growth and also incorporate a strong sustainability focus going forward? Now, since I'm the treasurer of the World Bank, as my sister said, it's all about connecting global savings to development finance. I think I really wanted to draw attention that there is no shortage of savings in the world. For example, even in the sustainability space, there are over 3,000 financial institutions managing about 23.5 trillion in assets that are signatories to the UN's principle for responsible investment. And these institutions are actively seeking sustainable assets. We recently did a survey in the World Bank, and that showed that 85% of investors look at environmental, social, and governance factors as part of the credit risk process. And 91% of investors now ask sovereign debt managers for ESG information. In terms of the green bond, where the World Bank is the first issuer about 10 years ago, let me say that that started a global capital market really focused on sustainability, not only in green, but in other sustainability issues, including all the SDG goals. So the debt issuance with a sustainability focus reached 732 billion in the year 2020, representing about 29% growth over 2019. And green bond is about 40% of the total. However, in Africa, only 20 thematic bonds have been issued across Africa, and just one of these was from a sovereign, Nigeria. And therefore, there is huge potential for us to focus on this agenda, to use the power of the capital market to connect the 23.5 trillion and growing already investors interested in investing in ESG in the huge demand in Africa to really scale up sustainability investment going forward. So I think given the time, let me just pause here, and I look forward to join the other distinguished panelists and look forward to a fantastic conversation. So back to you, Aruma.
I'm sure, Jingdong, that a lot of the participants have a lot of questions for you. What I admire is how you explained the importance of where we are with the sustainability agenda, but how you connected where Africa is, some of the challenges. I liked your data around that if we don't do something today, that from 55% of the world's poorest being in Africa, that it will rise to 90% by 2030. I liked also your point about the value of ESG, that even when sovereigns are being assessed today, when countries are being assessed, that people are looking at environmental, social, and governance issues. You, of course, had a call to action because you said there's only been 20 of those bonds that focus on sustainability. So there's an opportunity for us to target and mobilize all of the savings around the world, which is growing in leaps and bounds. Thank you so much for giving us that big picture, but also connecting it to the value of capital markets. And of course, we appreciate the World Bank and what you've done through the COVID-19 crisis. I think you said it was $160 billion that you've been able to provide. I'm sure many of the participants are looking to look forward to engaging with you. Thank you very much, Jingdong. Participants, you've heard the Treasurer of the World Bank. We've promised you that this will be an interactive event. So please share your views on what your countries are doing to contribute to a safer planet or to Africa's sustainability agenda or the global agenda. Whether you're on YouTube, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, please share your views. But also remember that we have a poll, and that poll, as our resident economist mentioned, the results will be shown during the Q&A. So if you haven't already completed the poll, please have your say. Our Air team are putting the links on every platform, so it's easy for you. But please share also what you're doing, what your company is doing, or what your government is doing to accelerate the transition to a safer planet and to an inclusive world. Now let me turn to introducing our next speaker, Mr. Ola Nadella. Mr. Ola Nadella is the Group CEO of FMDQ. He's also the founder and chairman of FC4S Lagos, the Financial Center for Sustainability Lagos. Many attendees know him well because he's one of the great architects of numerous innovative platforms and initiatives in the Nigerian capital markets. He has a wealth of experience in banking and capital markets at the technical level and at the C-suite level. But I call him a serial entrepreneur because he's birthed many important institutions for the world. Permit me to share a few personal words about Coco. Specifically, I consider one of my most important achievements as Director General of the Nigerian Securities and Exchange Commission as the approval of the FMDQ license. And that license would not have been birthed without the hard work of Coco and some of his colleagues. It is a pride of capital market regulators because it is one of the few over-the-counter platforms that has, if of its own accord, sought regulation. This has been emulated around the world by other markets. But what I also admire is what Coco and his team have built in the 7.5 years that FMDQ has been in existence. It's no longer just an OTC platform, but it's a full-scale exchange with clearing and other facilities. But I'm also proud of you, Coco, for your pioneering work on sustainability. This, of course, led to the establishment of the Financial Center for Sustainability, Lagos. Your passion for innovation and homegrown solutions to societal challenges is admirable and should be emulated around the world. Let me turn to you to share with us your perspectives on one, why do you believe the sustainability agenda is important? Two, what inspired you to establish the Financial Center for Sustainability, Lagos?
Thank you very much, Mr. Tay. When you introduced Jingdong, you spoke about your brother and friend of so many years. Though you did not refer to me as your brother, but I will refer to you as my sister because of the role you have played in the development, first in the birth of FMDQ and the development of FMDQ, and so many other things that come before and after we started FMDQ. So thank you very much. And also to your co-founder, Mrs. Sonny, who is one of the architects of the Financial Center for Sustainability Lagos. And when I speak more about that platform, the role played by a lot of market stakeholders in Nigeria, I hope I will touch on them, but Mrs. Sonny is one of them. In terms of, we just need to think of the profile of Africa to appreciate the importance of sustainability. We're talking of a continent that over 200 million are between the ages of 15 and 24. That sounds great, but most of them are jobless. That's about 60% of them. 50% of Africans do not have access to healthcare. 1 in 3 of this continent lives in extreme poverty. There is high level of malnutrition. We think further about education, and we see all the challenges, people that are excluded. I look further at gender parity, and I think the McKinsey study says it's going to take about 140 years for us to have gender parity in Africa. When you think through this profile, you cannot find a bigger agenda than sustainability in Africa. When you see all the challenges, and at this point in time, after you've gone through career in banking and you think you focused heavily on profits, you start thinking of the future, and you start thinking of tomorrow. And tomorrow being, what is this generation doing? What has it done well? But you can't do anything well if you do not think of the future generation. And that is the bedrock of sustainability. How do we live today? How do we make profits and think of people and think of the planet? So for me, the message, the big issue here is the situation where Africa is. Its contribution to carbon emissions is very low, but I think the impact of all the challenges, environmental challenges, is very high on Africa. And indeed, if there's no peace, there cannot be any sustainable development. And truly, if we look at the issues Africa is facing, if we don't fix collectively, as in the partnership, the type Jingdong spoke to, and the one you also expressed in your opening remarks, then it's going to be very challenging in future, not only for Africa, but for the global community, because we know the number of people in Africa, we know the population, we know the growth that we'd expect 2050, a country like Nigeria is, the forecast is maybe about 450 million people. These people must have good nourishment, must have access to education, must have good infrastructure, must be lifted out of poverty. And when you look at what to do with Africa, then all the imperatives of sustainability, the three imperatives will come to mind. We need to ensure social justice. For the international market, whether they will look at this as big opportunities to collaborate or social justice, something has to be done. The second part is, respecting the limits of the environment. I think we've all pushed the environment to the point where we, as Jingdong said, we need to halt. Maybe that's what the pandemic forced everyone to do and look at what is going on. If you take a country like Nigeria, and you all know what is going on at the moment, people are the far north of Nigeria who used to have access to Lake Chad, cannot find. Lake Chad has no water. When I was a student in elementary school, we drew the map of Nigeria, and you have that blue at the apron there representing Lake Chad. That is no longer showing on the map. So there's that migration from north to south, and the herdsmen are looking for water for the cattle. So there are big challenges, and I think that is how I'll put the first. We need to make Africa great for tomorrow, and it is when that happens that we can start seeing sustainability all over the world. Africa is one continent that we need to focus on heavily, and partnership has to come into place for us to think of the people, to think of planet, to think, and overall, to think of prosperity. The second part of the question, Aruma, is about the inspiration. What led us to this? And I'll speak to that in three big boxes. One is the national agenda of Nigeria, which which of course tapped into the Paris Agreement on the back of the former Prime Minister, the Norwegian Prime Minister, that quickly called the world into action, I think in about 1987. And Nigeria was a signatory to Paris Agreement. And of course, Nigeria has documented since then major economic development programs, and other necessary conditions to deliver on the Paris Agreement. Nigeria has also led, in the issuance of green bond. But sometime in 2019, we benefited from United Nations. They came down the environment program to assess how things were going on in Nigeria. And with FMDQ, there was the publication and other stakeholders in the market, a publication on the sustainability roadmap for Nigeria. That was the national part of it. And even at that, the government agency like Central Bank of Nigeria had published sustainable banking principles. So there were activities going on in Nigeria that I think gave us some inspiration. But for FMDQ, I think in 2015, we had a workshop and market stakeholders at that workshop where they appointed FMDQ as a project manager, actually then put together the debt capital market development program. And that was with a vision that by 2025, we should have built the market up to 40 trillion naira. This market today is about 1 trillion naira. And the reason why that audacious goal was laid before everyone was because that various opportunities in Nigeria under infrastructure, even energy, if you look at the energy side, biomass, geothermal, hydro, wind, solar, and all these things are opportunities that have not been tapped in Nigeria. So the markets essentially motivated the agenda for FMDQ, and sustainable finance was one of the areas of coordination. The personal one, which I'm going to use to round up, was the role you played, Aruma, in birthing FMDQ by being the Director General that licensed this agent of change. And you may not remember August 7th, 7 days after I assumed duty, you asked me to go and meet a certain man who was visiting Nigeria, was in IFC. That man was Jingdong. And when I met Jingdong with other investment bankers, I introduced what I'm planning to do. And he said, go and look at NAFMI. And from that day, the whole agenda of this agent of change in our ecosystem started. And I think finally that was the agenda until my youngest daughter started telling me about 17 SDGs and visited the United Nations to talk about sustainability. And when we sit at home now, I'm very careful of what I say and what I do, because she's always calling the SDGs out for me to behave. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Coco, for such an inspiring remarks. Like Jingdong, you really make the case of the sense of urgency that we must have in respect of the sustainability agenda. I think some of the statistics you shared about 200 million Africans, 60% of them without a job, is frightening. I also appreciate very much the point you made that this problem is not restricted to one region. And it's what I like to say, the world is borderless. So where Africa is where the rest of the world will be. And I think COVID-19 has shown us an example. And your daughter is an example of where young people are. They're very idealistic and they expect us to make that difference. But I will admit you to the family if Jingdong accepts. I could not admit you when I was your regulator. But one case I would make for you is that you and Jingdong are passionate about gender issues and have been extremely supportive of women. So my brother Jingdong, I hope you agree with me that we admit Coco into this family of passionate Africans, because I consider you an African, Jingdong and Coco as well, and passionate resource mobilization advocates. So let me now hand over to my co-founder, Tony Sani, and to delighted about what an idea we brought to bring greater attention to the Africa investment landscape, and to excited about where we are today. I'm so delighted, and I thank you, Tony, for your hard work, for the partnership. Now I'll hand over to you to introduce our next two speakers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aim, for the great work you've done so far in leading the conversation this afternoon. Like you, I am simply blown away by the contributions of our eminent speakers. I mean, listening to Jingdong this afternoon about the fact that there is clearly no shortage of global savings, and hearing about over 3,000 financial institutions, over $23.5 trillion available across the world for sustainability, it is so heartwarming for me. And noting that 91% of investment managers ask about ESG when they're considering investing already today. I am so glad that we did this together, or that we are doing this together. And I want to thank my brother, Coco. You have been admitted to the family officially. You are my brother, and you are also my sister's brother. So you are doubly our brother. Coco, thank you for emphasizing the infrastructure needs of the region, the healthcare needs of the region, emphasizing the unfortunately still widespread and pervasive poverty, and how we have to create opportunities for those who have been excluded economically across the region. And thank you for mentioning the gender agenda, which is so dear to my heart and to my sister Aruna's heart. I understand that the message today is very clear. How do we make profits while still thinking of our planet and whilst making sure that there will be a future for those coming behind us? Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for the great work you are doing at the FC4S Lagos. Thank you for birthing this initiative, and I look forward to engaging with you more, even as we continue this conversation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to bring on board another amazing global expert in this space, a speaker that has both private and public sector experience, extensive experience. I will be bringing on Ms. Nadia Tefus, the Managing Director of Economics of Mutuality Solutions, EOM. Nadia has experience as a consultant with McKinsey & Company across markets, both in France, in Geneva, and also in Africa, Middle East and Africa to be precise. She has experience working in the Ministry of Finance for the French government, the French Ministry of Finance, and very importantly, she's the Managing Director of the Economics of Mutuality, a radical way of thinking, an exciting and fresh way of engaging businesses and having businesses think in a different way and approach business from an ecosystem perspective. I am not going to anticipate what she's going to say. I just can't wait to hear from her. Now, Nadia, thank you so very much for the great work you have been doing in this unique and different space. Clearly, you know that business sustainability should, by extension, boost the overall GDP growth for emerging economies. The distinctive managerial innovation created by EOM to transform business performance so that companies can thrive whilst meeting these critical needs is a potent tool that can support economic development. I would love you to please share and highlight the areas in which the economics of mutuality business model has been supporting businesses to do business in a radically different way. Thank you very much, Nadia. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Toyin. Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure, and I have to say, I'll start by saying that I'm deeply attached to the continent. Not only I've worked actually a lot in Africa, but I'm also African myself. I'm Algerian and French, so I do feel I'm part of the continent. So let me tell you a little bit about economics of mutuality. It is actually a way of redefining the responsibility and performance of a company through the purpose lens, which we believe should drive actually strategy and all business decisions. So it's not just about proving you're a good citizen as a company or managing your reputation or being compliant. It is fundamentally about improving the way you do business, you operate, to generate not only more positive impact on people and the planet, but also improve your financial performance and your resilience. You could think about that as a bit of a risk-adjusted performance. And we really, as economics of mutuality, aim at reconciling societal responsibility and financial performance by developing innovative management practices. So our purpose, if you want, is really to complete capitalism and to move away, if you want, from the, I would say, from the rudimentary financial capitalism that we have today to much more a stakeholder capitalism and to transform the economic system by creating a mutuality of benefits among all stakeholders. So let me just tell you a little bit how it all started, because it started with a question from John Mars. So you probably know the Mars company. John Mars was the chairman of Mars, and basically the question was, what is the right level of profit for a corporation? To the Mars internal think tank called Catalyst. And Catalyst has built experience over the last 14 years, giving birth to the economics of mutuality, which is now an independent platform from Mars. And it's combined business practice within Mars, as well as academic research with Oxford Science Business School among the key academic partners. And as I mentioned, so Mars has now decided that it should actually this way of thinking and operating should actually benefit other companies and other stakeholders, and as this, it's like a public good, if you want. And so since the 1st of August 2020, Catalyst, which was the Mars internal think tank, became Economics of Mutuality, an independent platform that is made of a foundation, which is a public interest foundation based in Geneva, promoting new ways of thinking and partnering with academic institutions, again, like Oxford, but also like the China-Europe International Business School, CIBS, the Paris School of Economics, and so on, to drive research and education. But it also organizes events. We have an annual Oxford EOM forum, and we publish books, articles, case studies, and so on in relation with purpose-driven transformation. The second thing is EOM Solutions, which I lead, which is basically fully owned by the foundation to make sure that interests are fully aligned. And EOM Solutions partners with companies, investors, but also drives cross-stakeholder coalitions to transform, improve business models by providing very concrete support, consulting services, as well as developing internally, if you want, the economics of mutuality muscle through trainings and toolkits. And the objective for us, both the foundation and the EOM Solutions, is really to be a catalytic player. Now let me maybe just tell you a little bit the three big learnings, if you want, for us, or three core pillars. As I said, EOM means Economics of Mutuality, is a management innovation. And the idea is to align business purpose and the management behaviors to drive superior performance for people, for the planet, and for the companies themselves. So the first core pillar is really to define the purpose. You have to, obviously, it is the North Star, if you want, that really allows a company to drive its strategy and, as I said, all business decisions. And for us, the purpose of business is to produce profitable solutions to the problems of people and the planet, not to benefit from, creating problems for people and the planet. The second pillar, if you want, is to identify your key stakeholders and orchestrate the ecosystem of stakeholders, especially at the business unit level, so also at the geography level, to mobilize, enhance, and value untapped resources in the ecosystem. We do believe that the intangible levers are often the most powerful way to add value to a company. And we consider 4 forms of capital, which we believe need to be considered and remunerated. So one is the human capital. So it's really at the individual level, the skills, the experience, the knowledge, the personal well-being, and so on. The second one is the social capital, which is often forgotten. It's really the quality, intensity of the relationships between people. The third one is the natural capital, which we hear as what is the amount of resources that we need to produce one unit of product or service across the value chain. So not just the company itself, but really end to end. And the fourth one is what we call the shared financial capital, which is the degree, if you want, of financial inclusion of the different stakeholders. The third pillar is really about developing for a company the non-financial metrics, non-financial KPIs, but also management, accounting practices and incentives that will drive the right behavior. And we have developed a concept of, not just a concept, a practice as well, of mutual P&L. And the idea is really, if you want to rethink a little bit the management accounts, and that is designed for internal use. And the idea is to modify those and to internalize the negative externalities that you can have as a company, such as polluting the water. So you include that as into the P&L, but also to consider into the P&L the positive externalities, such as investing in skill building or trust building, and you consider them as investment instead of operating expenses. So all that to say that for us, it's really important to encourage companies and investors and all stakeholders to fundamentally, like Stiglitz would say, question the rules of the game. And let me just give you maybe an example that is actually very specific to Africa. So I just want to say first that for Africa, thinking in terms of ecosystem is fundamental, because we have so many things, so many challenges on the continent, that having civil society, governments, companies work together is a must. And secondly, interesting enough, in Africa, the high performers are twice more likely than other companies to invest actively in the communities in which they operate. So maybe just let me give you a very concrete example in Côte d'Ivoire, within the community of cocoa smallholder farmers, where we've worked. So we've assured actually that individual productivity is higher when people are connected to their communities and have developed trust-based relationships, so social capital. And this has been tested against individual characteristics, so gender, age, education, but also the plantation characteristics, so size of the plantation, plantation material. And we find the same type of results at the household level, which means that there is also a positive impact on productivity when the household is a member of a group or an association. And I'm saying that because that means that good agriculture practices have a role to play once sufficient social capital exists in farming communities. So social capital, if you want, is an enabler of technology adoption and diffusion. So I could give you obviously another example, and very quickly, we've also actually worked in Kenya and on a program which is called Mawa, together with Mars. Mawa means flower of blossom. And Mawa is a new business that we developed with Mars Wrigley, operating in the slums outside Nairobi. And because the traditional distribution methods were not able to reach those communities. And it is a multi-stakeholder route to market approach that allows local micro entrepreneur to earn a living. And I won't go into details, but let me know if you're interested. But the outcome is that we've together with Mars, we've basically created jobs, and today this route to market actually accounts for 20% of the Mars Wrigley business in Kenya. It has not only shown higher growth, but it has also shown resilience, more resilience than other parts of the business in Kenya, a high retention rate, and it's now also being rolled out to other emerging markets, e.g. Egypt, Philippines, India, within Mars Wrigley. So I just wanted to give you very concrete examples of what it means to actually consider non-financial forms of capital as a driver of societal well-being and economic performance. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you so very much, Nadia. Until I came across you and we started preparing for Air 002, I had never heard of the economics of mutuality. But after the lecture that you just gave me now, I feel almost like an expert. I want to thank you for how you have opened our eyes. And just to recap, one or two things that you said that resonated with me. You said that your business is about reconciling responsibility, social responsibility, with financial performance, and stepping away from the traditional concept of financial capitalism. And you are now looking at a stakeholder-driven, idea of capitalism. Very, very important. Now, it's nice to know also that social capital is a critical function and it's an enabler of technology adoption. Very, very important points that you've made. Another thing that resonated with me that you shared with us just now is how individual productivity is impacted so highly by the level of community involvement and community engagement. I mean, these are all things that, we didn't have evidence to support, but which I know the work you have done, is able to demonstrate. And thank you for the materials that you sent ahead, videos and papers, which we're going to share with all the participants, which we have already started sharing, on our platforms. So great contributions. We appreciate you very much. And I look forward to the interactive session with you. Before I go to my next assignment, I would like to remind all of us, thank you all again for joining and participating actively. The comments, we're seeing the feed from the multiple platforms. The comments platform is just lit. I want to encourage you to please follow the links that are being provided on the different chat columns so that you can participate in the poll. The poll questions are very important to how today's conversation is going to land. I don't know about you, but I'm full of excitement as to what those polls are going to reveal, considering the fact that we have participants from well over 50 countries, and especially the African countries that are concerned here. Thank you. On this note now, I would like to thank you all for participating so far, and my assignment is to take us to the next segment of this event, at which segment we believe that our fourth speaker will be joining us, a very important leg also to the ongoing conversation. I want to thank our speakers so far for the amazing contributions. I want to thank the participants so far for participating in such an engaging way. We appreciate all your comments, so many comments about how you're learning, how you are, your mind is being enlarged and expanded concerning these matters. So the first thing I would like to do, if I may, is to reveal the results. Okay, let me explain what we're going to do now. So I will be revealing the results of the first poll. Then we will go into comments about the poll results. We'll take one or two of your questions. I know they're burning questions already, and we have a team that is aggregating and throwing up the questions from the multiple platforms. So we'll take one or two of your questions. Our speakers are at hand to respond to them. If you want a particular speaker to respond, please indicate as well. Otherwise, just put your questions. I hope you're already putting your questions. I've seen one or two. Please put more questions. We'll take your questions, and then I'll hand over to Aim, who is also going to reveal the answer or the outcome of the second poll, and then we'll take some more questions as well. Thank you. Aim, it's lovely to have you back.
I'm delighted to be back. I see that Dr. Kevin Kariuki has rejoined us. So do you want us to probably have him share his own thoughts, and then we can have the segments? Yes. But this is amazing so far. And Dr. Kevin, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Kevin, for coming just on time. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to formally introduce our next speaker. He's coming last, but he's definitely not the least. And I personally am excited about what he's going to unpack this afternoon. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our next speaker, who is Dr. Kevin Kanina Kariuki. He's Vice President for Power, Energy, Climate, and Green Growth for the Africa Development Bank. I don't know about you, but that looks like a massive portfolio from where I'm standing. And I have no doubt that in the course of our conversation, the Vice President will demonstrate exactly why he has been entrusted with such a role. So you have seen his profile. All I will say is that he has extensive experience in the private sector, extensive experience building critical infrastructure in this space, and he has extensive experience funding critical power infrastructure across Africa, leading a team at the Africa Development Bank that is committed to achieving Africa's energy transition. And so my first question to you, Dr. Kevin Kariuki, as you join us this afternoon, is to give us an insight into precisely what the Africa Development Bank is doing to achieve the much needed energy transition across the continent. Thank you, and over to you now.
Thank you very much, Toyin and Arumna, for inviting me to share with you the bank's perspective on its role in Africa's energy transition. In considering how best to introduce the subject, I deemed that it would be necessary to contextualize it as follows. Firstly, that despite being home to a fifth of the world's population, Africa accounts for only 6% of global energy demand, just little more than 3% of electricity demand. This, I must observe, is abject energy poverty, which is evidenced by the following: that out of 790 million people without access to electricity globally, 565 million, or 72%, are in Africa. And despite recent progress, COVID-19 has reversed gains, and IEA, the International Energy Agency, projects that the number of Africans without access to electricity will increase by 30 million last year. Also, as a way of showing this abject energy poverty, at 185 kilowatt hours per annum, the continent has the lowest per capita electricity consumption in the world. And finally, the level of poverty, energy poverty, is also demonstrated by the fact that 900 million people across Africa lack access to electricity, to clean cooking, which excludes them from economic and health benefits that come with access to clean cooking. We cannot, by any stretch of imagination, be proud of these statistics. This is because lack of access to electricity constrains modern economic activities, limits provision of public services, and hampers improvement in the quality of life of our people. Africa must therefore significantly increase its energy and electricity access to emerge from this energy poverty and meet its sustainable development goals. I read somewhere that rising incomes and rapid urbanization will combine to push electricity demand by at least twice by 2040. This will be at a significant cost. The International Energy Agency projects that up to 100 billion per year will be required to meet electricity demand during this particular period, that is 2020 to 2040. Accordingly, from the African Development Bank's perspective, Light Up and Power Africa pillar of a high five strategy could not be more appropriate. This is because Light Up and Power Africa speaks to both electricity access and productive use of energy, which has the potential to catalyze the remaining high fives, namely Feed Africa, Industrialize Africa, Integrate Africa, and improve the quality of life of the people of Africa. Collectively, according to a UNDP assessment, achieving the African Development Bank's high fives will allow Africa to achieve about 90% of its sustainable development goals. Then comes the energy transition challenge, as encapsulated by the 2015 Paris Agreement, following alarming concerns on impacts of global warming. The Paris Agreement, as we all know, aims to hold the increase in global average temperature well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels by 2100, and to pursue efforts to limit the increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Lest you did not know, Africa only contributes about 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions, of which the electricity sector accounts for just 2%, with a balance caused by agriculture and deforestation. The latter mainly for firewood. The Paris Agreement recognizes that emissions from low emitters, such as most of Africa, could peak after those of developed countries and declined to carbon neutrality in the second half of this century. This is an important differentiation for Africa. Thankfully, as Africa is starting from a very low energy use, the late peaking could not cause significant increase in global emissions. And to drive this point home, a World Economic Forum reference states that even if all sub-Saharan Africa tripled its electricity consumption overnight using only natural gas, the additional CO2 would be equivalent to just 1% of global emissions. That is an increase of only 1%. Yet, deliver indelible impacts on the region's energy access and socio-economic development. Be that as it may, though, Africa is committed to net zero carbon emission transition for its posterity. And it is in this context that Africa joins the rest of the world to transition to cleaner energy sources in line with the Paris Agreement. Thankfully, Africa has vast and unexploited clean energy sources comprising of 10 terawatt of solar potential, 350 gigawatts of hydro potential, 110 gigawatts of wind potential, and an additional 15 gigawatts of geothermal potential. This, I observe, when harnessed, can anchor Africa's energy transition to clean energy. So where are we in the transition, and what is the African Development Bank doing in this regard? Between 2010 and 2019, Africa's renewable-based generation increased by 77% to 50 gigawatts, with the contribution of renewables in the continent's generation mix increasing by 4% to 21%. Therefore, Africa's transition has therefore commenced, as further corroborated by the International Energy Agency's projections that renewables will contribute up to 51% of the energy mix by 2030 under a Paris Agreement as aligned scenario. At the same time, the African Development Bank's share of renewables investments increased from 9% during 2001 to 2010 to 70% during 2011 to 2019, and 80% since 2016, when the New Deal on Energy for Africa was introduced. Talking of the bank's New Deal on Energy for Africa, the African Development Bank energy investments since 2016 are expected to generate about 2.8 gigawatts of generation capacity, most of which is from renewables, and provide electricity access to some 18 million people. But more needs to be done to address the energy poverty I referred to earlier. So recent completed projects include a 510 megawatt Kwazizate solar power plant reportedly the world's largest concentrated solar power plant, and the 310 megawatt Lake Turkana wind project, currently Sub-Saharan Africa's largest wind farm. Our operations, however, go beyond the interconnected grid-based projects, and we are leading in the quest for Africa's rural transformation through decentralized or distributed generation, aware of projections that by 2030, about 50% of all new connections will be from decentralized power solutions. For example, solar home systems and mini-grids. Then there is the truly ambitious and transformative Desert to Power project that seeks to generate 10 gigawatts of solar power across the 11 countries of the Sahel region, which brings me to the point of convergence between energy access and transition to clean energy. In my view, Africa's energy transition narrative must be closely integrated with the drive to increase energy access and efforts to commensurately increase generation capacity in a low carbon pathway. Africa's energy transition, however, faces significant challenges, of which I will mention only two. The first is efficient mobilization of capital. Here, we are talking about $100 billion per annum. Considering the paucity of public resources, attracting private sector financing is therefore an imperative, which calls for the creation or improvement of the enabling environment for private sector participation in the sector. The bank, therefore, not only finances projects through the various products such as loans and guarantees, but also works with African countries to improve the enabling environment by promoting best practices in IPP procurement and supporting legal, regulatory, as well as tariff reforms, as well as measures to improve the financial performance of utilities, particularly the off-takers. The second challenge I must mention here is the intermittence of solar and wind, the challenges that are caused by intermittence of solar and wind intermittence to Africa's power system, and the pursuit for an all renewable scenario. Consequently, the bank has been supporting combination of different technologies, including battery energy storage systems, through the bank's Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, through what we call the green baseload component. However, until energy storage systems become affordable and Africa power grids are more interlinked, natural gas power plants will continue to play an important role in Africa's generation mix due to the favorable operating characteristics that facilitate integration of wind and solar into power systems, and also the fact that gas power plants are cheaper, quicker to deploy, modular, and can perform the whole spectrum of generation duties, that is baseload, mid-merit, peak and peaking. In the event, perhaps the emphasis should be more on gas as a transition fuel rather than its fossil fuelness. Otherwise, we will risk throwing away the baby, which is gas, with the bathwater, which is fossil fuels. Also, that natural gas in the form of LPG could ideally relieve our women folk from cooking with firewood, thereby reducing deforestation and, by extension, emissions cannot be gainsaid. The challenges notwithstanding, though, Africa must remain focused on the concurrent twin objectives of energy access and transition to carbon neutrality. The African Development Bank stands ready and willing to partner in this important journey. I thank you.
Wow. I said Nadia's contribution was a lecture, but I have been properly tutored by you, Kevin. Thank you so very much. I not only appreciate, and I am sure all our participants will agree with me, not just the intellectual depth and the richness of the content of your presentation, but the passion with which you delivered it. And I have been monitoring the comments, and people are talking about picking up new phrases and learning new phrases from you. Energy poverty. One of the phrases that I love that you used is finding the point of convergence between energy access and the transition to clean energy. That is so fantastic. And I note very much the great work that the AFDB has been doing in this space. And thank you for reminding us of not just your intention of addressing energy poverty, but your commitment to lighting up Africa, industrializing Africa, and improving the quality of life of Africans, and also to the efficient mobilization of capital for this purpose. I note also that your aspiration is that 50% of all new connections will be from decentralized sources going forward. I'm going to look forward to asking you a few questions during the interactive session, but for now, I think that we would have to go to the full-blown interactive session now. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't forget you have an opportunity to engage with this amazing panel of speakers. This is a unique opportunity indeed. I hope you are putting your questions up in the chat sections of whichever platform you are joining us on. And please don't forget to participate in the poll. This is probably the last seconds that you have left to participate in the polls. Welcome, AIM. It's been an exciting afternoon for me. I hope it's been the same for you. Oh, you're muted.
Absolutely phenomenal. Each of our speakers has given us a compelling reason, but also provided us practical solutions, whether in respect of the opportunity to mobilize resources globally, as Jingdong, the treasurer of the World Bank, did, the practical examples about how you build from within a country what Nadia described as multi-stakeholder approaches. I see that Coco and yourselves and others who are part of the financial city for Lagos are already using those approaches. And the Nadia's articulation of what the problem reminds me of another great mind here at University of Oxford, Professor Colin Maher, who's a contact person for Said Business School for the economics of mutuality. They are also evangelists. They talk about profitable solutions to the problem of people and planet, and not profiting from creating problems for society. That is such an important takeaway. So you can make profit, but please don't create problems for society. And then Kevin, with his heart of energy access and providing clean energy, he's saying the transition has to be just. We could not have planned this, but I think each of them brings a perspective that energizes me, and I hope it energizes you and others, to really say, if I'm private sector, what do I do as a result of what we've heard today? If I'm public sector, what do I do as a result of what I've heard today? If I'm in the capital markets like yourself, Tony, what do I do to make sure that I tap into these billions of savings? If I'm not part of the financial city, for Lagos or any other networks around the world, should I join that network? I see that our poll has come up, so I'll hand back to you.
Absolutely, AIM, absolutely. This is such an exciting engagement. And very quickly, I'm going to be unveiling the result of the first poll this afternoon. Our first poll this afternoon is, how harmful do you think global warming is? And suspense, What is the outcome of the poll? What do the people, the participants across the world think? Wow. AIM, I think our message has come through. I think our message has come through. 74% of participants believe that global warming is a great deal harmful. It is critical to the resolution of problems such as hunger, insecurity, and 17% believe it's growing in importance, 8% believe it's growing moderately, but that there are more important issues such as hunger and insecurity, and then hardly anybody thinks not much. The problem is so nobody thinks the problem is exaggerated, and everybody believes that if we resolve the problem of global warming and climate change, we actually will have a solution to a lot of other problems, such as hunger and insecurity. For me, for example, I believe that even a lot of the community disturbances that we have had across communities have actually been due to the pressure of global warming, which is pushing livestock dealers and farmers to keep relocating to find, better access to what they require for the livestock. So if we could fix this problem, we'll fix a lot of our problems of hunger, a lot of our problems of insecurity. And that's my candid opinion. So I totally agree with the outcome of this poll. And AIM, what do you think? And perhaps
I'm the chief evangelist for sustainability, so it's music to my ears to see that everyone feels that this issue is a great deal, or most people. I need to be a Democrat. There are others, the 17% who said, and who are actually we should say 100%, because they said it is important as well. I'm energized, and I think, Tony, it must be that those who kind of decided to be part of this event today already are on that journey on sustainability. So I can just add that people should adopt a country, adopt a city, that you will be the advocate for having them join you on that journey, because the data is that global warming, we need to keep temperatures below 1.5 degrees centigrade, and based on the submissions made on the nationally determined contributions by countries, we're at twice that. And so we need to be much more ambitious. So each one of us who is a champion on this program today needs to make sure that we become an advocate to bring others on board. That's what I would say.
Lovely. I wonder what our speakers think. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Nadia wants to be cold then.
No, I was just going to say, I completely agree, and I'm very happy that there is increased awareness about the importance of the topic. So I think that's great. I also want to make sure that there is the global warming topic that is crucial. There are also other topics in the environmental space that we shouldn't forget, like water, like organic, inorganic resources. So I think for me the resource topic goes even beyond the global warming, though obviously it includes the global warming. So just keep in mind that resources, natural resources, is a much bigger topic than that.
Absolutely.
I thought it was interesting that you and Coco made the linkage between security and the impact of climate and security issues, and that some of the things that we're dealing with today as a result of the security issues. Some of the security issues are a result of climate issues. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was going to ask another speaker, maybe Jingdong, to tell us what he thought of the outcome of the poll. But then this amazing question came. So if Jingdong can quickly share his thoughts on the poll, and then I would like to pose this question to one of the speakers.
Well, thank you. I think I'm not surprised by the result of the poll. It is very similar to what we're saying at the bank, that sustainability is now front and center in global development agenda. So this is great. I think awareness is the beginning when we translate the awareness into actionable items, right? So each of us in our own expertise area, how do we then bring solutions? For example, in the, and Nadia mentioned this, I believe, that it's not only about green, it's about a lot of other ESG related issues. So here at the bank, we have now broadened our bond issuance into all of the 17 sustainable development goals. I just give you one example. That is when we used food waste and loss as a thematic area to issue bonds. I just couldn't believe the overwhelming support. You know, I went to Japan and it was highlighting the fact that food loss and waste is actually the third largest source of carbon emission after energy and transport. It wastes 20% of freshwater resources, and it's an issue that can be addressed, right, by improving logistics, making sure from crops to the food table, you know, that supply chain, that logistic chain can be improved. So that's an angle that was not highlighted, you know, without bringing awareness to the issue. So there are other things, childhood nutrition, broadband, you know, but it should come back to, in addition to sustainability or resilience, inclusion of all of the ESG items, whether it's energy, as Kevin discussed, social issues, and the power of capital market, as Coca and I passionately advocate for and try to bring new innovation on board. And there are in the capital market space innovations that we can do. But let me just stop here. If I have a chance, I certainly would love to share some of the possibilities that we can bring from capital market innovations. Back to you, Ms.
Thanks so much, Jingdong. Thank you for sharing again what the World Bank is doing and for the interesting way in which you always bring everything back to innovation. I look forward to hearing from you about these interesting innovations. Now I would like to throw the question from Dakika Tisini to the Vice President of the AFDB. Kevin, the question goes, how African renewable energy projects will be sustainable whilst there is little financial investment towards manufacturing of renewable energy products in Africa? And that is a question from Dakika Tisini. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Toyin. The real thing here is how do we reduce the emission? I think that's the crux of the question, because whether you generate the power, or sorry, whether you make the products elsewhere or you make the products here in Africa, the key thing, in my view, is how you produce the energy that will actually reduce the emissions that you're talking about. Here we are talking about solar, for example, solar power plants. It's all about the economies of scale. When we start doing a project like what I mentioned earlier, the desert to power, this is a huge investment. It will involve a lot of panels. Then when people or the investors in those kind of projects will invariably look at the project and say, there is sufficient economies of scale here, and therefore we can actually, for example, manufacture the inverters. We can manufacture the panels here in Africa instead of having to import all those panels from other parts of the world. You can actually invest here. The critical thing, and it's one of the things I always say, is a challenge for us in Africa, is that a lot of our economies are inherently very small. And therefore, the projects that we do are always small. And if the projects are small, then there's not sufficient incentives on the part of the investors to manufacture parts of whatever they are building locally here. However, When you have programmatic projects such as what I mentioned, desert to power, or you have huge, sort of what I was talking about, the decentralized systems, huge programmatic projects happening, then it makes eminent sense that the investor, it makes eminent sense for the investor to manufacture some of the products that will constitute the ultimate produce that they are trying to make locally here. So I think that's what I would say. But otherwise, apart from that, the critical thing is, how do we generate? How do we maximize, for example, turbines? How do we maximize using solar? How do we maximize using wind to replace, for example, coal generation, to replace heavy fuel generation, and so on and so forth? I think that investment will come, but what we need is critically sized investment. And also, secondly, is to try and integrate what we call integrated projects, whereby we can do large thematic projects, say solar, for example, desert to power in a particular country in Africa. And then what you do at the back of it, you also have a big industry, so that you are creating a special economic zone, anchoring this particular solar power project that we are talking about. So I think the ability to integrate industrialization and power production, in this case renewables, and also the idea of having large projects will help in a big way in ensuring that we also manufacture some of the products, some of the renewable products locally here in Africa. Thank you.
I see that I think, Kevin, you were speaking to the ecosystem approach that also Nadia had talked about. And I think it's a great time for us to review our next poll, the results. In this poll, we asked that you rank the impact of each of the 4 issues that I will list out on the adoption of clean energy sources across Africa. The first is a favorable policy environment. The second is widespread enlightenment on the dangers of non-renewable energy sources. The third is massive deployment of investments into the sector. The fourth is reduction of prices of renewable energy sources. So I ask our guest speakers to make a case for each one of them. And then I will make my own case. Ask Tony to make her case and I'll make my case. Who wants to start first? I'll ask Jingdong to start, and then Coco, Nadia, Kevin, and Tony, in that order. So, Jingdong.
Well, thank you very much. Actually, I think you mentioned the incredible solar expansion in Egypt. It's a project I was involved, and that actually ticks all the boxes in the survey that you just did. Because the Egyptian solar project did it in a different way, right? That is, rather than connecting each individual solar solution provider to each individual possibilities of project, and each would lobby the government for a different power purchase agreement, raising their own money, the whole thing would take a long time. But rather, I think the World Bank Group, what we approached it is that how can we work with government in a unified, transparent way of being able to share all the solar size, and then invite an open bid. Everybody would benefit from the power purchase agreement policy reform, and it's a transparent process. As a matter of fact, I was at IFC, and we actually led the syndicated process of close to $1 billion of investment, right? Together with IFC and other partners, where the World Bank focused on policy reform and working with government to come up with a list of solar sites and a transparent power purchase agreement. And ISC led working with the private sector solar solution providers for them to pick and choose, okay, I'd like to work on this one, I'd like to work on that one. And then we syndicated a global financing package. And for example, we actually were able to interest the AIIB, the new kid on the block in multilateralism bank, who actually came together, investing in Egypt with us. And then MIGA provided risk mitigation to those private sector players who felt that they need additional insurance. So the whole thing was a huge success because it brought efficiency, it brought scale, it brought a trust in the government that would otherwise take a much longer time to present. And I'm happy as a capital market professional that we were able then to market this as a turnkey package that reassured outside investors and sponsors to come in. I thought that was a very successful example that Aruma, you mentioned. Back to you.
Wow. So I guess that's all the above: the policy environment, massive deployment, awareness, and innovation and pricing in terms of renewables. I think we're running out of time. So after Jingdong responds, each of us others needs to either choose all the above or choose one of it and make the case. Yes,
and I just want to say, it is actually, I forgot to mention, it's 13 solar farms done as one project. So absolutely ticking all the boxes.
So efficiency, scale, innovation, partnership. Coco, would you like to add a few thoughts?
Yeah. Thank you very much. You can see that the scores of the four are very close, but I'm going to go for investments because to build a scale, of course, we know the huge gap we already have in Africa to build our scale to make an impact. I think we're going to see huge investments coming into Africa, and then the multiplier effects of that in stabilizing the economy and providing other jobs are just, for me, going to be very impactful. So I will vote for investments on that one.
Okay. So one word, Kevin, Nadia, are you voting for all the above, or do you want to emphasize? You choose the one you want to emphasize, because our producer is telling me that we need to answer one more question before we close, and we're already 8 minutes behind time. So Kevin, one word.
For me, policy any day. Policy carries any day, because it is policy that will result in a transparent procurement process. It is policy that will inform tariff reforms to make the off-taker bankable. It is policy that will also inform the interconnection arrangements with the rest of the utility, and indeed acquisition of whey leaves in the country. So for me, policy.
Well, your own vote won anyway, so you're along with the rest of others. Nadia.
Yeah. So I think my word would be really around the public-private partnership. So obviously that has a huge policy component, but I just want to make sure that also it has to be obviously attractive to private sector investors. So I think for me, the point is, how do we build the country or the economic case, at the continent or the country level, while also building the investment case, around concrete, very specific projects on renewables.
Tony, I must give you the last word on this before we ask the next question. I know what you will say. I'll say it for you if you don't say it.
I changed my position, all of the above.
Okay. Well, a secret, we had a conversation, both of us, that I chose policy environment, and my co-founder, Tony, chose massive investment. So together, we're good in any case. So if Ola is asking, what role can formal education in higher institutions of learning play in our goal to have a more sustainable world? Are there opportunities to be leveraged here? So we'll have one person respond. Tony, if you permit me, so that we don't keep people too long, maybe we'll close and we will still have a chance in the future maybe to have another conversation. This is a big agenda, we knew. So I don't know who wants to talk about the role. And Jingdong, I have one question for you that I want to ask you. So I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but so maybe some other four speakers other three speakers. One of you should take this.
I'm happy to say a few words. So I mean, as I mentioned a bit earlier, for us, education is just critical. I mean, that's how we will really, I think, you know, because it's the coming years, but it's not just the next 3 to 5 years. It's actually the coming also 20, 30 years. So there's for me, there is a responsibility around training the new generation of managers. So really, you know, through whatever MBA, master's degrees, courses, but even, you know, below that. But there's obviously an immediate responsibility through executive education trainings. So how do we embed this question of sustainability in, you know, in exec ed programs? That's for me absolutely fundamental if we really want to move the needle and develop new management practices and make sure that we move from the awareness to the action logic.
Thank you for what you've shared, Nadia, around the value of education at all levels and that we need to start today. And Ifola, thank you for that really great question. Jingdong, I'm keen because of the disproportionate impact of climate issues on the African continent, for you to share with us, in addition to the compelling case you've made for us to increase issuance of sustainable development bonds, of green bonds, are there other ways that the World Bank and other institutions are working on to finance resilience around the world and in Africa particularly?
Thank you very much. So let me first say, last week I joined a room in a conversation with Lincoln College, Oxford University students. Now the next generation is already very aware and passionate about development. I think our message is really, how do we interest more of them instead of go to Wall Street, work in development finance, join the African Investment Bank, join the World Bank, join our community in making a difference. So that is one area of higher education. I think all of us as practitioners of development, if we can outreach more and raise awareness, that's one angle I want to plug in. When it comes to innovation, given the time, I won't talk about our world's first blockchain bond, the World Bank issued, or the Rwanda franc bond. Let me focus on one thing. Just imagine with a higher frequency of natural disaster, what happens is that a country has a physical space, and the finance minister would already allocated different resources to different ministry. Normally what happens is if a natural disaster hits, the finance minister has to call his or her infrastructure minister saying that, sorry, the money I have allocated to you to build a bridge, that's gone, because we have to use that money to fight the devastation of the natural disaster, and because of limited budget. So what we have been doing for the past decade is we wanted to use capital market solution, in this case, what we call catastrophe bonds, right, to be an important additional source of finance. So when it comes to natural disaster, whether it's earthquake, typhoon, or drought, we now have very well capital market tested solutions. Give you one example, Philippines. Last year, we helped the Philippine government to issue the first CAD bond, where instead of relying on dipping into budget deficit, investors come in to buy this bond with a World Bank credit, but with added premium reflecting the probability of a natural disaster. When disaster then hits, this time it's about earthquake and typhoon. What happens is that because if because it is a parametric bond, without having to have assessors go to the field, takes 6 months to a year to assess the damage, right? This will trigger a payout from the bond very quickly, hopefully within a month or so, without burdening government budget, apart from the premium the government pays on top of the bond. I think we have done about $4 to $5 billion of cat bond, mostly in Latin America, which is very well done. By the way, in the United States, in Florida, cat bond is very well established. Now, the attraction to investor is that this is a fixed income product that is uncorrelated with government bond, corporate bond, and therefore it adds diversification. And because for natural disaster, there is a 100-year history of data, the pricing can be very, very accurate. So that I think for Africa, cat bond could be a new source of financing, addressing climate change, addressing countries' critical needs without additional burden on very stretched government budget. So back to you.
Okay. Thank you. I'm embarrassed that this session has gone on for 17 minutes, but there's so much to learn. Tony, I think we should draw things to a close, except if Bola, Kevin, Nadia have any thoughts that they haven't had a chance to share that they want to leave with participants. If not, we'll draw this to a close. This is a dialogue that has to continue. But does anybody have a burning issue that they want to share before we draw this to a close? If we were at a physical location, we'll be left with those who are really keen to stay. But I hear that we still have as many representatives as we had at the beginning of this session. So I guess everybody is excited about issues of sustainability. I don't see any signals from any of you. So please permit me then, Tony, on our behalf, to draw what has been a phenomenal session to a close. The starting point for me, on behalf of Tony and I, has to be to say a big thank you to Kevin, Nadia, Coco, and Jingdong. You've taken what is a big agenda and you've offered us what has been a master class. First, on understanding the global sustainability agenda. Second, on the compelling case for Africa. Third, on how we can go about it in a profitable manner, in a way that carries everybody along, whether it be energy, as Kevin pointed out, which needs to be just. The transition for Africa needs to be just, whether it be leveraging an ecosystem approach, a multi-stakeholder approach, Nadia, as you pointed out, whether Coco is really thinking ahead about the sense of urgency that we must have today to tackle these problems today, and calling all of us to action in the way you've started the initiative. Or Jingdong, where you've said there are resources available. We need to mobilize those resources both domestically and internationally. I really just, on behalf of Tony and I, say a big thank you to you. Most importantly, what I heard from each of you, our four speakers, is a clarion call to action. And you told us what we as individuals can do, what policymakers can do, what the private sector can do, what the opportunities are, and how we can address those opportunities. And for me, I'm excited. I know these are very difficult times, given some of the statistics, Coco, you and Jingdong, and Kevin and Nadia, that you shared about Africa. But I'm excited about the possibilities because, Nadia, you told us that we can profitably address many of these challenges. So a big thank you for an engaging session. To our distinguished guests and participants, thank you again for joining us for another engaging edition of AIR. We're sorry that we could not take all the questions like happened with us last time. There are lots of questions because we're streaming live on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and other areas. And Tony and I are really grateful also to our air volunteers for your hard work and dedication. Finally, as you know, International Women's Day is celebrated in March every year. So we will be dedicating our next event, same time, third week, Monday, the 15th of March, to commemorating International Women's Day, even though International Women's Day is on 8th, but I see everyone is now taking the whole month of March. I know that Tony and Coco are doing something on the 8th of March. Jingdong normally rings the closing bell, so I guess you'll ring it virtually this time. And I'm sure the ADB and Economics of Mutuality are also doing something. So we chose to really dedicate the month of March event to commemorating the International Women's Day. So please watch out, distinguished guests and participants, for our invitation to register for this third edition. We look forward to welcoming you back on the 15th of March. Tony and I ask you to stay safe and thank you for being part of this journey where we're trying to ensure that people understand Africa and understand the investment landscape in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye all. Bye Jingdong, Kevin and Nadia.
Bye-bye.
Well done, Aruma and TFS.
Bye-bye.
Good job.
Thank you, all super speakers. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And we thank you very much.